And she brought her husband Johnny again, who's getting to be a regular here. And we're very happy to have her here to talk about Meadowwood. But before she starts that, I asked her if she would tell us how she got into this work. Karen?
Thanks, Ellen. I got
that's right.
Yep. So my path to Nehemiah was a little non-traditional. All my schoolwork was in the biological sciences. So I have an undergrad degree in biochemistry, a PhD in physiology, love the science. I worked at Promega for about 6 years, and I also really love that. But I started doing more research, and when I got done with grad school, I prayed really hard about what direction I should go and do volunteer work in, because when I do something, I do it all the way. So I want to make sure it was the right way. So God led me to the area of mass incarceration and criminal justice reform. So I started doing little volunteer things here and there, but I ended up doing a workshop series with Nehemiah, and it just got to be more and more. So I ended up having basically 2 full-time jobs. So it got to the point where I knew I was going to have to make a decision, and it was maybe 2011, God tapped me on the shoulder and said, you're going to do this now. I said, what? I mean, it was real. It was like audible. And I said, all right, God, I just spent a long time getting this PhD. It was hard. So I said, all right, God, if that's what you think is going to happen, then you show me how that works. And it was over the course of 3 years, my job at Promega kind of took a different turn into an area where it's just not my passion. So I was thinking about making a change because of that. And then that was about when Justified Anger was getting started, and money came together for a position. And I sold a house, bought a condo in a period of about a month, and started at Nehemiah, and never looked back. You learn, when you get a PhD, you learn how to learn, is probably the biggest thing, how to fail, and and how to think about things critically, right? So the nonprofit world is one that is usually really, qualitative and heartfelt, and you have good stories to tell, but we're not always that great at keeping track of the numbers. And we're getting into an evidence-based world, so I saw that little area where I could use my skills to help. So that's where I am now. So today I'm going to give you just a little update on what Justified Anger's been up to. I'm going to talk a little bit about Meadowwood, and then just touch on some of the next steps, kinds of things that follow the history class for any of you that might be taking in February. So you can go to the next. So just a reminder that there's 3 basic principles that Justified Anger is looking at for change, and that's policies, practices, and people. So we believe that you can't really make lasting change unless you make a change at all 3 levels. A good example is the civil rights laws. When we put laws on the books, we removed the racialized language from the law, but we forgot to go and tell people that they had to do things differently now, right? And so that's how we're left over with all this racism still. So, and can you just click it a couple of times, set some animation, and that'll turn red. There we go. So the Meadowwood project, and also the next steps, is really about this practices in people. We had 2 main strategies. One is convening stakeholders, but Meadowwood really falls in aligning the community through innovative interactions and building social capital. So this is kind of what it looks like. So the one thing about Justified Anger is it started kind of by accident. And we're really trying to do something different, right? Do things a different way, so that, do things the same way over and over. You know what they say about that. So we're getting better. It's been difficult. It's a big kind of abstract idea that we've been working on for the last 3 years. So we're getting better at describing what it actually is. And this is a good way to lay out the 3 main pieces of what we're doing. So the organizational piece involves the 5 focus areas, and we have work groups that involve subject matter experts that work in the field to work together to build a shared agenda and hopefully develop an initiative that they can work on together, trying to de-silo some of those things and work collaboratively, which has been missing for a long time. So we've got education and criminal justice and economic development up and running so far. The grassroots side of things includes Meadowwood. So we believe if you do all the work on the system side, but you don't organize the people, then the solutions are going to be misinformed and the people might not be ready for them. If you do all the work on the grassroots side, you get people motivated and charged up and they hit a brick wall when they get to the systems. So what we're working to do is do some organization work on both ends and then start building communication between the two. And so that's a very slow process, but definitely making progress. The other major piece is mobilization. And this is where you guys come in. So, we've had a list of over 1,000 people interested in doing something for the past 3 years. And it's been tricky for us to build the capacity or even identify the things to do. But once we have actual things identified at the systems and grassroots level, that's where volunteers and allies come in. So we've built some training programs for that. So the whole thing is really dependent on what is the community doing, what are the allies doing, how are we getting people mobilized in different areas so that we can actually make the structural change. So I don't expect you to read what's on the slide, but I'm just showing it to you because we're starting in 2015. Going up to 2017, and these are all the things that we've done in Meadowwood. So sometimes it seems like if you don't see news articles, you don't see programs, you don't see events, sometimes it seems like nothing's happening. So we've been, since this is our Madison plan rollout that was at the Alliance Center, and since then we've done things like convene stakeholders in Meadowwood, both community members and organizational, analyze data from some old surveys, and the biggest thing has been getting Jackie Hunt, who's on staff with us, working to develop leaders at the grassroots level. So going in, really getting to know people, building trust, and not so much creating people, but identifying where does leadership already exist. So one of the biggest gems in our community that we don't even know about, there's so many hidden gems, especially in the neighborhoods that experience the most poverty. There are real leaders there. There are people that are running programs, running support groups, running food pantries out of their own homes, supporting each other during funerals. And these people have a really hard time being respected and being recognized by the status quo or by the systems that are already running. So what we believe is that justified anger's responsibility is to identify people that have the potential to develop as leaders in the same way, and help to create some kind of platform so that they can, get the same kind of grant money resources that the rest of us get to help their communities. Instead of having an outside organization get the money, come into a neighborhood, and do the work they think should happen. We already have people in the neighborhoods that know what should happen and just need the resources, just need the help. And most of the time they're doing it for free. So traditionally what we see is bigger organizations, and I'm not saying anything bad about these organizations because they no doubt do a lot of good work. But the bigger organizations like United Way or Journey Mental Health or even sometimes Boys and Girls Club, just the whole range of institutions, right? It's easy for them to get, or easier for them to get the grant money because they're well known, they have credibility, and funders can trust where their money is going. But that doesn't always get to the heart of what the community needs, right? So we think with our education and our experience, and this is true sometimes in part, that we can look at a certain problem and identify solutions. But where we fall short is not truly understanding the dynamic within smaller communities, within neighborhoods. And then we develop solutions that aren't actually practical. Either they don't fit the real need, we're missing the mark on what the actual need is, or we often design solutions that aren't accessible to people in communities. So, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky when we talk about cultural relevance and cultural competency. So we know, I bet everybody in this room has experience of having a meeting. You know you're going to do something, okay, we're going to set a weekly meeting, we're going to meet Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, for an hour, and we're going to get stuff done. That's the best way to do it, right? I mean, I think so. Turns out not everybody thinks so. So making sure that we're prepared to honor the methods that other people use to get things done. And it doesn't always look how it looks when we do it. And that can be really tricky because it requires letting go what you've experienced your entire life. And, you know, just taking a slight risk and going with what's already happening. And that's one big way that we can really show respect to people in our community, specifically people in Black communities and at any income level, not just at poverty, because we do in fact have a Black middle class here, contrary to popular belief. So I guess what I'm saying is, if the work that you want to do is supporting the Black community, supporting efforts, sometimes the best way to do it is to get in there and listen, pay attention, and see how you can support. You don't need to lead the meeting. You don't need to spearhead any efforts. They've got that. But where can you provide support to make sure that those efforts are getting recognized and get the respect they deserve? So this hasn't been updated. One of the other big things that we've been doing is exploring principles of leadership. So this is a week-long course for the individuals that have been identified as leaders or emerging leaders. And Jackie takes them through a curriculum of things like personality style, communication, conflict resolution, business ethics, and all of those kinds of things. So we're complementing what they're already doing within the community with a knowledge base. And as a result of that, the people that have gone through this training, we've trained about 13 people so far over the past year, and we sort of so I guess the end of that is coaching people with the project that they want to do. So they articulate what it is that they want to do. They want to start a mother's group? Do they want to start a health network in the community? And then we ask the question, how can we support you? How can we help you design your business plan? And then how can we not do things for you, but where do you need to be connected to resources? Where do you need to be connected to other people in the neighborhood that you can work with? That sort of thing. And be there when conflict arises and when questions arise. So that's been pretty successful. The next step for that is we're working on developing a community liaison position. So this is someone who lives in the neighborhood and would be the person that can sort of communicate between the grassroots leaders and the organizations so that we start to get some of that conversation going. And this position will be actually funded by organizations in the Meadowwood community. So we've got a decent amount of funding for that already. We've created an advisory board and get that position started. So hopefully you'll hear more about that in the new year. And once we've got that up and running, we'll feel like we've basically created something. So the idea is not for Justified Anger to stay here and do Meadowwood. It's for Justified Anger to help provide what's needed for Meadowwood to do Meadowwood. Identify leaders, identify the next wave of leaders, and provide tools so that can keep going. So I just wanted to play a short video that describes, some of you may have already seen it.
When we decided to move our efforts in the Meadowwood, we hired Jackie so that she could become a community organizer and a person who would really hear the hearts and the dreams of individuals while really working among them to establish a sense of trust. This resulted in leadership development strategies where we are giving tools to individuals who really want to bring about change in this community. Really, to be honest,
actually knew Dane was going out tonight. I just said I was really curious.
And I had her on my radar. And so when I finally was able to reel her in, it wasn't like an easy catch. It was just like watching this light bulb come on. And after that, you know, she was coming up out of her shell. She was speaking more. Our community really doesn't know where this got coming. This program, this concept that she wrote up, I was like, wow, it is so needed.
Well, the concept consists of it would be sort of food for elderly and for adults. She gave me the tools and she actually made me know that I could do this, and all I needed was just the right people to help me to put it together.
The multi-generational part of it is that the youth are serving, they're cleaning up, they get to sit with the elders and talk, so wisdom is being passed on. If I'm ailing and I'm gonna press out, I'm gonna press out for something that's gonna feed my soul.
I'm doing this from the bottom of my heart. This is something that's been in my spirit for a long time, and now I'm able to bring this out, and I'm not gonna stop until it's all the way out.
Everybody was chilling, like, she came up with all these, like, red noses. I mean, she had she had the red noses, they got the big hands from, like, the baseball games, and, like, the kids were just having a good time, and, like, everybody kind of, like, broke out their shell. We got to see kids be kids, and, like, adults were playing cards, and it was just, like, it felt like home, like, we were actually a community for the first time. So we were coming out to school, for 3 hours, and then weekend shifts, patrolling the park in the Meadowwood neighborhoods. And the business owners really liked it because they felt like their business wasn't being vandalized, and Walgreens theft went down a lot, and so it was a great impact.
The other part of it is the skill set that actually has, no matter where she goes, she'll be able to utilize those skills. And so what she creates here in Meadowwood will be something that she can also duplicate in other communities, so the whole greater Madison community will benefit from that.
I was just excited because they were like, whatever you guys need, we're there, you know, just let us know, and we'll get it done, and that's what happened. So like, the first time somebody came and said, this is what's going to happen, they actually stuck to their word.
So that's just an example of some of the things that are going on. Another exciting piece is that the Meadowwood Neighborhood Center has a new director as of this summer. His name is Tari Robinson. He's a black man that's had a lot of involvement in the Madison community over a couple of decades. So it would be really great to see how he uses his expertise in what the neighborhood center is able to provide. And one exciting thing is that he has arranged for his staff members to take the Exploring Principles of Leadership course, and plans to keep that kind of thing going. So you can go to the next one. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on the mobilization piece, because they all kind of go together. Next one, yeah. So where we're going with mobilization, we're calling it ally development, because it's not just a standard volunteer experience. A big part of Justified Anger is leadership and capacity development. So almost every single nonprofit anywhere struggles to have, the need is always bigger than the amount of resources we have, the amount of money we have, the number of people that we have available, staff hours. So we need to figure out, how do we expand the capacity of these organizations so we can really get people out there, work together, pool our resources, and get some of this work done. So one of the ways that we're doing this is training people that are involved in Justified Anger to be able to identify the issues on their own, use your own expertise and knowledge, and then your relationship with Justified Anger to be able to put together some of these things and execute them without having to necessarily have an organization tell you this is what needs to be done. Because the problem with that is when organizations are really busy, sometimes you need volunteers, but you're too busy to get them, right? Because you have to train a person, you have to supervise. And so we kind of just keep going and going without the help need when there's really great people in the community that can fill those roles. So it involves 3 steps. The first is education. One example of the education is the history class. So we really believe that if we're developing allies, it's our responsibility to help make sure that people understand how we got here, the historical basis of racism, how it exists in our systems and structures, how it exists in our institutions. And through learning that kind of history will help you understand where you fit into that. How do you leverage your privilege to be able to make changes in these systems? And this is, it never stops. It's a continuous cycle. But once you've had the baseline education, we move on to individual action. So if you work somewhere, maybe you talk to your HR department about policy changes for hiring. Or maybe you start a lunch conversation talking about some of these issues. What can you do? Or write to your congressman. What can you do on your own? And then the big thing is collective action. So we've got about 3 groups up and running right now. One is working on, started out as a book drive. It sort of evolved into helping the existing organizations who are already getting books in homes, make sure that they have the supplies necessary to do that. So one of the things we often do is say, oh, I have a great idea, I'm sure no one ever thought of it. But someone probably asked. So it's a really good idea when you have an idea like that you think can help, is to first look out there and see who else in my community is doing something like this. How can I learn from what they're doing? Maybe I have a unique twist that I can implement. Or maybe I did just think of the exact same thing these people have been doing for 10 years. That's okay. But then don't start your own thing, get involved in what's already happening and help them make a bigger impact. So we're taking the groups through a training process that involves a vision. So Justified Anger casts the vision as to the direction, the general direction. The group works on their own vision for the project they want to do. Another example is an essentials pantry. So the group is working with Melissa Sargent on her project to make sure that there's feminine hygiene products in all of the schools for girls to access. And then the other thing is a court advocacy program. So working with people to develop a program so that when someone has to go to court, it really makes a huge difference just to have someone sitting in the courtroom in support. So we're working on that at present. So once that's done, what's the data? Why is this a problem? How do we know it's a problem? And then looking at the community need. So we're identifying a specific community. For example, in the court advocacy, we're saying that people involved in the legal system want advocacy. So we have to make sure that that's true. And we're not just assuming that we know the solution to this problem. So we go ask questions. We ask questions of current leaders. Maybe we design surveys. Maybe we do a listening session. Depends on what it looks like. Then we identify the gaps, which is looking to see what's already going on in the community and seeing where do the services, where are the holes in the services, where are people falling through the cracks, or where are certain needs not being met because of the design of other things. So how can this collective action sort of fill in those gaps? The next step is assumptions. So the book group, for example, we know the data says that when there are books in the home, kids read better. So then the group started talking about, well, I know what we can do. Maybe we can go, and I'm not criticizing at all, this is a thought process. So we can go into people's homes and we can observe them reading to their kids. And I know what we can do. We can go in and teach parents how to read. So there were a few assumptions there. Number one was that people would want them in their homes. Number two is that certain homes need help with reading. They need their kids' help with reading. And number three, that the parents who would benefit from the book drive can't read, right? 3 assumptions. So if we identify those things, first we have to find out, do those have a basis? Are those rational assumptions? If they're not, then we need to keep thinking and redesigning. Because we have to make assumptions about everything we do, because we don't know everything. We got to take a chance and then see how it works. And then finally, planning. So once we've gone through all the work of identifying the need, identifying what the real issue is, then we can plan an approach that can deal with it. So what we're doing is, and this is our Next Steps program, is helping people who have the skills and the capacity and who have the desire to volunteer in these areas, helping you guys be resource yourself so that you can identify issues that you want to work on and put your skills to work. And justified anger is always there to consult with, and, you know, because we always want to make sure, is this my privilege talking, or is this really a meaningful direction? So we never want to lose that source of communication, but this is how we're building capacity at this point. And it's looking pretty exciting so far. So let's see, where are we at? Okay, great. So we got about 10 minutes left. That's all the information I wanted to share. So I just want to open it up for comments and questions. Yeah.
I'm very encouraged by everything you're talking about and the way it's all been set up. I'm curious, when I moved to town 20 years ago, this was and continues to be I'm sorry. When we moved to town 28 years ago, this was and continues to be an area with beautiful homes. When we were first here, mostly white people. Now it's changing. Has there been a lot of or any white flight that anyone can verify? I mean, is that happening, or are people staying?
So, I mean, there's definitely white flight neighborhoods. So, for example, Allied Drive in, I believe, the 70s was a parade of homes area. And as soon as people of color started moving in, white people started moving out. And this has happened, I mean, even Meadowwood is an interesting case because we have high-income homeowners right next to very, very low-income renters. But we do see talk of people leaving. Once we start to hear more things in the story or in the news about crime or people that see more kids of color, like for example, Falk Elementary School, butts right up against people's property. So how are they feeling about seeing that? And where is the knee-jerk threatening feelings? Where do they come in? So I don't know. I'm not aware of studies that I'm sure someone's looked at this more closely. It still does happen. White flight definitely happens. I just can't give specific examples beyond that. Yeah.
I'm guessing though the homes are still expensive enough that it's probably mostly white people buying these homes still.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's younger couples maybe, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing to consider is, you know, homes don't necessarily have to be expensive enough to keep people out of them, but we're also dealing with the issue of generational wealth. So there's been some really interesting stories on NPR recently, you can Google this, about even if you're not a wealthy family, did you still have a family that was fully self-sufficient, that was making a certain wage, and so that when you got of working age, your money was basically yours. So you could keep building for yourself, and you could get to a place where you could buy a home, where you could actually save money because you were making that wage. You had access to education. And then there's many of us that have family, that have money, that have the means. So if I'm in college and I'm struggling to eat, which is a big issue on campus these days, I can ask my aunt for, you know, a loan while I'm getting through, and she has the money to give to me. Or we have, a good example is churches, for example. A lot of churches, I believe Christ Press is one, many churches in Madison have endowments. So people that attended the church decades ago, loved the church, that were able to leave a substantial contribution so that the church could operate. Well, decades ago, they had the privilege of being able to accumulate wealth, to be able to make money, to buy and sell property, to operate within the society. A person of color in the exact same role in the 50s, 40s, you know, as late as the 50s, didn't have the same ability to go and buy property, to accumulate assets, and then pass that on to their family. And so over the generations, white people by and large, and of course it doesn't mean everyone, but by and large have been able to get that generational wealth accumulation. Particularly black people in this country have not had that opportunity specifically because of how the laws were a few decades ago. So then what we have happen is instead of passing money between the generations, all the money is distributed right now among people because it's needed right now to take care of business. So when it comes to things like home ownership, there's a disadvantage because of that generational issue. So that's one big thing that we need to consider. And I just want to, I feel it's important to always reiterate when we're talking about issues with wealth. We do have a middle class Black community in Madison. Every Black person in Madison or Dane County isn't poor, didn't graduate from high school, went through the criminal justice system. We have terrible statistics, but we really have to challenge ourselves when we think about this. That even people who are very affluent, even Black community members that are very affluent, suffer from the same kinds of racism that we do. And we know that there's also wage disparities where that comes into, so. Yeah?
I don't mean this to be a politically incorrect question, but, you know, I live near the Meadowwood area. Actually, we're one of the Meadowwood subdivisions from the future, and in everything that you've shown us in terms of the work of the Meadowwood, community, I'm not seeing where the integration to other races is happening. And it can't, this is my opinion, but it can't just be an outreach to the Black community. There's got to be outreach between the Black and white community and the Black and Asian community that's in that area, because if you're going to pull that neighborhood together, then it has to be the community as it exists today that gets pulled together. So I guess I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. We absolutely need everybody of every race and ethnicity and socioeconomic background and educational background to work together. That's absolutely how we get to having inclusive and productive communities. But we're not there yet. So we still have a lot of work to do. For example, within the Black community in Meadowwood, but we're also doing separate engagement activities with the white community, with the churches in Meadowwood, because we need to have these conversations so that once we start building communication between races, that there's an understanding, that we're starting from an equal playing field. So the Black community feels, respected, resourced, and so often what has happened is we'll have statements like that, but we don't see the action. So we can have the conversations, but we'll see we see this in the news all the time. When a person of color expresses they've experienced racism, our knee-jerk reaction is to explain it away and say why that can't be true, because we don't want it to be true. So while we're at that place, we're not going to have productive conversations. And especially in a community like Meadowwood where there's such extreme poverty, we need to start there. We need to resource people there. We need to build people up there, because for so long they haven't been supported. There's been service providers, but there hasn't been any support to raise people up. Does that make sense? So, the short answer is you're right, but we're not there yet. So it's really important that we invest on all sides of this. This didn't start overnight. This has been going on since our country was formed, and before, right? So it's not going to be in a year or 3 years or even probably 10 years that some of these things are being solved. I think maybe 2 years from now, we're already starting to have those conversations and start to figure out how can we get Black and white community in Meadowwood to start working together and understanding each other. We're already starting to do that. But before it's really obvious and visible, it's just going to take a lot of time behind the scenes to make sure that we're ready. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does make sense, but at the same time, the ability to develop that really kind of spins around having representation within that. I admire you for what you're doing. You're a white person, you're working in, something that's really, really good, and you're not a person of color. And I think in terms of making something work in the Meadowwood neighborhoods, got to start getting some mixed race, white, Asian representation there, because those are going to be the things that are key to pulling the communities together. Right. The longer we wait to try and make that connection, I think the harder it gets, because then we go, why haven't we been doing this for years? Why are we not reaching out, why are we not reaching out early on? Why are we not having a leader within the Meadowwood Neighborhood Association or within that,
Well, we've done that, right? We've done that. We've had plenty of attempts at mixed race events. There's monthly dinners at the Meadowwood Neighborhood Center. There was a community member, a Black community member on the Meadowwood Neighborhood Association for years. She wasn't able to get things done that she's been able to get done while she's not on the neighborhood center or neighborhood association, right? Because of exactly what I'm talking about. When she brings up an issue that's core to her community, as she sees it, she gets shut down. And she's not able to do what she needs to do and develop the strategies that she needs to develop. And maybe most importantly, she's not given the resources that another white person on that neighborhood association would be given. I can give you many examples of that. So it's not that this hasn't been done. It's been done over and over and over again, but we haven't done the groundwork, and so we don't make any advancements. The bottom line is that when Justified Anger started working in Meadowwood, we met with stakeholders, but with limited capacity, the white people were okay in Meadowwood. We needed to focus on the Black community. I'm a behind the scenes person. Part of the reason I'm here today and not Jackie Hunt and not Angela is because Jackie Hunt's handing out Thanksgiving baskets today. So she's got work to do. Angela Fitzgerald, our volunteer coordinator, is working today. I had the privilege of being mostly behind the scenes office work, so I can come here on a Sunday and talk to you guys. So it's really understanding the complexities of all of these things. And just because we would like to be multicultural and exist together doesn't mean we can.
Yeah, usually when they reach out to the white community, you get doors slammed in your face. You get people saying, I want to do this, I want to do that. But then when time comes, nobody shows up. There's no resources. So what do we do? So we have to continue to find out a way to make this thing happen ourselves, since we're not getting the support that other groups are getting. And that's one of the major reasons.
Right. And this is playing out very publicly in the news in multiple ways. One example is a community development fund that is a competitive fund that people are applying for. And there was just an article in the paper about several grassroots organizations that the city ended up recategorizing. So they applied for a certain larger pot of money to support their organizations, and the city decided that they didn't have the capacity to support the larger amount of money, so they moved them into a different category without even having a conversation about capacity, right? These are all Black leaders. But the question is never asked, that same question is never asked to the white community who are running organizations. Especially organizations that have been doing work for a long time. We know that there hasn't been any change in these racial disparities in 40 years. The graduation rate is the same as it was 40 years ago. It's just the numbers are bigger, so we recognize them. There hasn't been any change, so we have to figure out, and so these organizations haven't been held accountable for that. You can go through public RFP after public RFP, and you can see the outcomes that these groups propose, and it doesn't mean, again, that they're not doing good work, because many are doing very essential, necessary work that has to happen, but it's not moving the needle. And that's really because we haven't engaged people of color and given them the capacity to do the work as they know it needs to be done. And so until we're able to do that, we're never going to be able to have that equal conversation. So we gotta just be patient, and we all gotta work on it day by day and understand that. We can talk after.
Yeah, well, I think you literally just said what I was about to say, which is that we have a long history of finding experts to solve problems and saying we're going to get someone who's a real estate development expert, we're going to get someone who's an economist that is a PhD in economics that worked over. usually those are white people because of, you talk about the generational wealth sort of thing, and there have been many cases of failures of the experts leading the cause. And I think what's so important about what you're talking about this is building capacity within the community and drawing out on those talents and capabilities that are there but haven't been fostered, haven't been molded because of the lack of the opportunities that have been put into place.
Right.
And getting, drawing the, I said, I'm a consultant, so I'm an expert in some ways, but when I go in and work on a project, it's always about, I tell my clients that, I'm an expert from the outside, but you're an expert from the inside. And we need to work together to figure out, using my technical knowledge and your knowledge of the community and the social aspects, to figure out what works together. I think that's what, just another way.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. And recognizing people in these neighborhoods, regardless of their educational status, that they are the experts and they know way more than we do about what needs to be done. So I think we're at time, right? So I'll be around if you want to talk to me. You can find my email on the website or from Ellen or Andrea. Feel free to contact me. We only get farther in life if we have these discussions and sort things out. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate your taking the time to do this.
Thanks.